Welcome back. Our next presenter for today is Dr. Lynne Hall. Dr. Hall received her undergraduate and master's degrees in nursing from Clemson University. She was on the faculty of the College of Nursing at Clemson University for 3 years prior to pursuing doctoral study. Dr. Hall completed doctoral and postdoctoral studies in public health at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where she majored in maternal child health and minored in epidemiology. She joined the faculty of the University of Kentucky in 1985 and taught at the undergraduate and graduate levels. During her tenure there, Dr. Hall directed the PhD program for 11 years and served as the Associate Dean for Research for 15 years. In 2008, she received the William B. Sturgill Award for Outstanding Contributions to Graduate Education, the university's highest honor for graduate education. In 2011, Dr. Hall retired from the University of Kentucky after 26 years of service and joined the University of Louisville. In the same year, as Professor and Associate Dean of Research, Dr. Hall's program of research focuses on interventions to improve mothers' mental health and in doing so, improve outcomes for their children. She has received federal funding from the National Institute of Nursing Research, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, and the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. All total, she has received approximately $5 million in internal and external funding for her research. Dr. Hall has more than 60 peer-reviewed database publications and has presented her research widely at regional, national, and international conferences. Twice she received the Best of Image Award from Sigma Theta Tau International for publications in the Journal of Nursing Scholarship and was named a Distinguished Writer by the Honor Society. Dr. Hall and her colleagues also received the D. Jean Wood Award for Nursing Scholarship 3 times from the Southern Nursing Research Society. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Hall.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. And I'd like to share some thoughts with you about writing for publication and sharing our knowledge. I'd like for you to feel free to ask questions as we go along. I'm wearing my reading glasses, so if I don't see you, wave or stand up and feel free to interrupt me with your question. Today we're going to focus on identifying steps for novice authors to take in order to turn an idea into a manuscript to submit to a professional journal for publication. First of all, I'd like to talk with you about why do we need to publish? Why write for publication? Well, there are a number of reasons that we need to think about publishing in our profession. You have knowledge and expertise that needs to be shared with others. Some of you may not think that you have that knowledge and expertise that's important enough to share, but as nurses at all levels, you have knowledge that is important to share, especially those who are working at the bedside. It's really critical to disseminate research findings if you conduct a research project. Of course, those in academia need to be concerned with publishing for promotion and tenure. and to develop yourself as either a faculty member or a nurse administrator, whatever your role is in nursing. Writing for publication is a way to develop professionally. There's personal satisfaction that comes with writing for publication. It's fun to see your work get into print, to open that manuscript or the Kentucky Nurse and see your abstract or your article in print. Each of us has stories to share. So I encourage you, as we go through this presentation, to think about the stories that you might share that would be beneficial to others. So what am I going to write? There are a variety of options to think about. It could be an abstract, and an abstract is a good place to start because an abstract is short. So if you've never taken the step to try to begin writing, an abstract is a good place to begin. An abstract that could be submitted to a local conference or a regional or a state conference like K&A for a poster presentation. It might be a clinical article on something that you've had experience with in a clinical setting. It could be a review article, review of literature on a topic that you have faced in the clinical setting or in the educational setting. It could be an evidence-based practice manuscript, a project that you implemented in practice, and you could share the results. Because if you face that problem in practice, there are many, many others who have likely faced the same problem. And knowing about how you approach that problem would be extremely beneficial. You can report on a quality improvement project. And I expect that many of you have been involved in quality improvement projects that would be valuable for others to know how you approached the problem and what you did to improve the situation and what the outcomes were. It might be a case study of a particularly difficult patient situation that you had and how you handled it. A research article, a novel teaching strategy. For those of you who are nurse educators, is there something that you're doing in the classroom, something that you've created in terms of technology in the classroom, something that may relate to simulation that you could write about? It could be something as simple as a letter to the editor about an article that you've read, or a commentary on an article that you've read. And finally, it could be an article for the lay public, something that you share to help increase the knowledge of the public and hopefully improve health outcomes. So how do you go about choosing a topic? Well, first of all, you have to find something that you're interested in, something that you have expertise in, because if you're interested in the topic, it will help sustain you through the manuscript development process. Also think about how can you connect your writing to your teaching, practice, research, or service. It's much easier to write when you're connecting it to something that you're already doing. Because it's not like reinventing the wheel when you can get 2 for the price of 1. So think about how you can connect a publication to your teaching practice, service, or research. You have homework to do. You need to be fully knowledgeable about what is in the literature related to your topic. And you need to think in terms of how can what you're going to write bring a new dimension, shed new light onto the topic. So be certain that you get into the literature around the topic, read, come up with questions after you read each article. You know, what's left unanswered in this article? What are the suggestions for future directions that are recommended by the author? Because those are things that can give you ideas about where to go with your manuscript. And if you are intimidated by the whole process of writing, as many people are, start very small. Your first manuscript or your first attempt at writing does not have to be something lengthy. It can be something very short. It can be a column. As I said, it can be an abstract, a commentary, a letter to the editor. So don't feel like you have to tackle writing a 15 or 20 page article to begin with. Because if you start small, have some successes, that will help to build your confidence. Finding a writing partner is a wonderful way to get started. There's always comfort in numbers in writing. So look for someone who has expertise in the topical area on which you'll focus. Find someone that has some complementary strengths to bring to the topic and the writing. One of my colleagues that I wrote with for a number of years loved to do the literature reviews of articles and the discussion sections. Well, those were the 2 parts that I despised writing. My favorite parts were working on the purpose and the aims and the hypotheses, and then writing up the methods and the results sections and doing the tables to portray our findings. So we worked extremely well together. You need to find a writing partner that is committed, that really wants to be a true partner in the writing process. They've got to make that commitment to working with you. So find a person who is also interested in writing for publication to be your buddy in writing. In collaborative writing, you need to decide on authorship and contributions to the manuscript or whatever piece you're writing before you begin the writing. The critical reason to decide on authorship up front is so that there are no issues when it comes time to submit the manuscript for publication. You want to decide clearly who's doing what, put it down in writing. You want to set deadlines and adhere to those deadlines. So set up meetings, set up expectations for each meeting as to what will be accomplished, and then go by those guidelines. because you will each hold the other accountable for producing. There are times when you've got to know when to fold. Sometimes collaborative partners don't come through for a variety of reasons. And if an individual that you have invited to participate as part of your group is not coming through for you, then you need to talk with that individual, give them a deadline for producing their part, and say, we need this part by October the 31st. If you're unable to produce that by that point in time, then I'll assume that you are no longer interested in working on this manuscript. Hopefully that won't happen with the group that you choose. Seeking support as you write is extremely important. Your colleagues can give you constructive feedback, and when you ask for that constructive feedback, you want them to be critical. You want constructive criticism, but you want them to be honest with you. So, accepting feedback requires developing a thick skin and then using those suggestions to improve the quality of your manuscript. It's tough to take that feedback many times. A colleague of mine that I worked with at the University of Kentucky, who was a medical editor, it was always difficult for me when I gave her my manuscript, and I think I'm a pretty good editor. I do a lot of editing for our faculty, and I have done that for many, many years. But I could give Carol the manuscript, and she would find the most elementary mistakes in my writing that I had simply just missed, primarily because I was too close to it. And she could see those things with a fresh set of eyes. So it's difficult to critique your own work. You can do that to a point, but then you need others to look at it and give you that feedback. If you can find a mentor who's good at writing, ask that person to work with you. Writing support groups can also be beneficial. We've had some writing support groups at the University of Louisville, and I also held some at the University of Kentucky when I was there. And it's very helpful to have people sitting around the table, coming together and talking about the progress that they've made, or the lack of progress that they've made. Because that accountability to a group propels people forward in their writing. It's very critical that you get in the habit of writing. Writing in a block of time, saying I'm going to wait until I have a whole day when I can sit down and write, works for some people, but often that one day block never comes. So writing in small pieces, an hour, 2 hours at a time, and setting that time aside so that you have that time blocked out on your calendar for writing is critically important. First, you've got to make a decision. Are you going to write or are you not going to write? So make that decision that you're going to take a chance on yourself and begin to write. Write about what compelled you, what you're enthused about, what you're excited about. Johnson and Mullen also recommend that you write something on your manuscript or your abstract and work on it every day, even if it's just a small piece. We mentioned scheduling blocks of time to write, but again, those don't have to be huge. And you can also capture time by writing in the gaps. Writing when you're waiting on your children to get through volleyball practice or dance class. Writing a couple of sentences will help you make progress. And then there is always the option of, if you have a work-at-home day, lock yourself in a place where you won't be bothered, get all of your writing materials together, and work away. It takes discipline to write. Sometimes I feel when I write as though the preparation for writing takes too much time. And by that I mean getting things organized to begin writing. So get yourself disciplined to jump right in and write quickly. Promise yourself some rewards. So some delayed gratification. Once I have written these 2 paragraphs, once I have my purpose and my aims or objectives of my paper written, then I can get up and go have a cup of hot tea. So give yourself rewards, but set blocks, portions of the manuscript or your other piece of writing that you're going to complete before you do other things. Johnson and Mullen also recommend keeping to-do lists for your day, your week, your month, or even your year and career. If you can get a month schedule set up for your writing in blocks of an hour or 2, that would be a wonderful start to help you get moving on an article. For each of us, we have our own optimum time for writing. If you're a morning person, schedule your writing time in the morning. If you do better in the afternoon or evening, schedule your time to write then. Discover what your optimal time for writing is. And when you get started with your writing, if you get on a roll, keep moving. Stay in the flow of writing and move forward. There are a lot of barriers that you will encounter as you begin to write. So here are some suggestions that I have for you to get rid of some of those barriers. You need a clean desk or a place to work. Writing in a cluttered area is not conducive to productivity. I suggest that you start with small pieces to work on. Trying to tackle an entire manuscript will be overwhelming. So carve out a piece and say, this is what I'm going to work on in the hour or 2 hours that I have. Begin with the part that you think will be the easiest for you to write. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. So when you're writing and you make good points about carving out small pieces to work on, do you find it more difficult that if you start on different sections than pulling that
Okay, actually, it's a wonderful question, and we're going to talk in a few minutes about beginning the manuscript and the benefits of having an outline. So I'll address a couple of those, your questions in just a minute. Saying something very simply and succinctly is much better than being verbose. Reviewers of manuscripts like conciseness, and so do editors. But the important thing is not to labor over your words as you begin to write, but just to get them down on paper. When you've made accomplishments in your writing and achieved a goal, give yourself a reward. Be certain to do that, because that gives you something to look forward to as you are writing. And I suggest that you work on only one manuscript at a time as a beginning writer, because you'll get overwhelmed easily if you're trying to focus on more than one manuscript. Identifying the right journal is a critical issue, because if you don't identify the right journal, the likelihood of getting your manuscript, even if it's a great manuscript, is very slim. So you need to think about the type of article that you will write. You need to think about who is your target audience. Who do you want to read the piece that you're writing? And are the readers going to be interested in your topic? Who would benefit most from reading your article? Is it the lay public? Is it nurses? Is it healthcare professionals in general? And you also need to think about, does your topic and the article type fit with the journal? Some journals publish critical reviews and evidence-based practice articles, while other journals only accept research-based manuscripts. So those are issues that you need to address. There are other factors to consider, and maybe not so much for the novice writer, but journal circulation. How widely is this journal circulated? That information can be obtained from the journal website, so that you know how many different individuals and organizations subscribe to that journal. How frequently is the journal published? Some journals are published quarterly. Some journals are only published twice a year. So that will affect how soon your article might get in print. Take a look at some sample articles. Look at the date that the article was submitted and the date that the article was accepted for publication. Then look at the date of publication. See how long the time frame is for each of those phases. Some journals are not publishing until a year or 18 months out. So your paper might sit in press for 18 months before it gets published by some journals. And another thing I would say to think about more if you are an experienced writer is the impact factor of the journal. This is a measure of prestige of that journal based on citations as an indication of how much the journal is read. The next thing you want to do is to get the author guidelines. These are available on the websites of each journal. They give information that is critical for you to write your article. For example, information about how your article should be formatted, how long it should be, what is the page limit, are citations to be done in APA or AMA style or another style. The author guidelines will describe how you should do your figures and tables. They'll tell you about margins and spacing. Now, author guidelines can be a little daunting, but keep in mind the author guidelines are your friend. If you follow those guidelines to the letter, your manuscript will stand a much better chance of getting accepted for publication. Editors do not like to get articles that are in the wrong format. Journal reviewers don't like that because it says this person submitted this article, they did not pay attention to the author guidelines, therefore it may raise questions even before reading the article about the quality of your manuscript. So before you possibly even begin writing, find out if the topic is of interest to an editor. So send an email, pitch your idea for a manuscript, and see if the editor is interested. Describe to the editor what you're thinking about submitting, but before you pitch your idea to the editor, you want to be 100% certain that nothing on your topic that is like your paper that you're planning has been submitted for publication. So, in other words, do your homework. Look at the journal, see what's been published. Make certain that you would be presenting something new and different, and that it is a fit for the kinds of articles the journal accepts. So, now you know that the editor is interested in your manuscript. It's time to make a plan. Start with a very clear and concise title. Titles don't need to be lengthy, but convey the population, the nature of your study or your review within that title. I always like to begin by doing a title page. Follow the author guidelines for the format for a title page. And the reason I like to do the title page first is that it makes my manuscript official. It has a title page, it has the title, the authors, the acknowledgments, and it's like my manuscript has begun. You need to state your purpose and your objectives or specific aims, because these are going to provide a clear focus for writing the other sections of your manuscript. So get your purpose down, get your objectives down, have other colleagues review those, give you feedback on those, then move to making an outline for your manuscript. Now, in making an outline, that doesn't have to be with Roman numerals. It can be bullet points. In most articles, there will be 4 or 5 key points that you want to make in the introductory review of literature section of a manuscript. So you've read the literature on the topic. You have ideas about the key points that you want to make. So use those as bullet points for your outline for the paper. Then the rest will fall into place because there are different headings that will be required, and get you several articles from the journal that you're going to submit to use as model articles. They don't have to be on the same topic. They just have to be articles that you think are particularly well done. And use those to gauge how much should I write in the background and significance. How much should I say about the method that I use for the systematic review that I've done. How detailed are the procedures or the measures section if it's a research article. So find a couple of really good examples and use those as well as the author guidelines to help you. So as you begin to write, break your paper into small pieces. And I'm going to go back to your question. You do not have to write in a linear fashion from beginning to end. Now, you always want to have your purpose and your aims or objectives written, but you can start at any point with the writing of your manuscript. Let's say you're doing a systematic review of the literature on evidence on a particular topic. You may want to write up the methods approach before you delve into the summary of your findings. So it is not necessary to start at the beginning. Once you get several pieces written, that will build your confidence. That will help you, give you momentum to move on to the more difficult section. And topical sentences. Those bullet points that you've written as your outline can often be in the form of topical sentences. A topical sentence is a statement of what you've gleaned from reviewing literature. So, as an example, a topical sentence might be, low-income mothers with young children are at high risk for depressive symptoms. That would be the lead sentence of a paragraph that is part of your support for the paper that you're writing. And then following that topical sentence would be citations, discussion of what is found in the literature. For example, with that particular topical sentence, you might go on and say, Smith and Jones 2012 conducted a prevalence study of low-income single mothers with children under the age of 6. 60% of the women met the criteria for a high level of depressive symptoms using the Center for Epidemiologic Studies depression scale. So your topical sentence first, and then supporting literature to follow. And if you, in writing a background and significance section, follow that pattern, it will be extremely easy to break it into pieces. So ideally, those topical sentences, if I were a manuscript reviewer, I would like to take your manuscript and be able to read your first sentence in each paragraph in the background and get what you are trying to tell me in the article. In other words, convey that message by allowing me to read the argument that you are making, the premises that you are stating for why this manuscript and this problem is important. One of the most difficult things is to begin getting something down on paper, because as you write, you may think, this sounds like garbage. Don't worry about how it sounds. Don't worry about the grammar. Don't worry about conciseness as you begin to write. Just begin writing and getting it down on paper, because then you can go back and get input, you can do revisions, you can ask someone to edit it for you. The important thing is to get your thoughts down on paper. And that's one of the hardest things for beginning writers to do. The more practice you have with writing, the easier writing will come. So, for example, if you wanted to start by journaling about your day's events in the clinical setting, that would be a good form of beginning to write. If you're an educator, begin by writing about what transpired in a class. If you had a great epiphany from student questions and ideas about how to do something novel in the class the next time the group meets, write about it. You do, at some point, need to be concerned about being concise, and there are many easy ways to do that. For example, using to instead of in order to, or due to the fact that can simply be said using because. In the event that, substitute if. So there are many times that we can use a very simple word instead of multiple words. Proofreading carefully is essential. Typos says to reviewers, oh, this person was not very careful in developing this manuscript. So you want to be certain when you're ready to submit that you have a polished product. And accuracy of references is extremely important, because that's a real irritant for editors as well as for reviewers if references are not done appropriately. Using a reference manager such as EndNote is a great idea if you have that available. Tables, diagrams, and figures are wonderful to use in a manuscript. A picture is worth 1,000 words when you are writing a manuscript. A figure or a table can convey so much more information in a concise way than narrative form. Now, that's not to say that you don't want to have some narrative, but if you use tables, figures and diagrams wisely, they will catch the reader's eye. They will be able to convey your key points much better than in a narrative. Now, on the flip side, an editor looks at a manuscript and will be wanting no more than typically 3 to 5 diagrams, figures, or tables. That's sort of a general rule. So you need to use tables sparingly, but determine what data can best be presented in that way. You want to prepare a cover letter to the editor. Indicate that your manuscript hasn't been reviewed, hasn't been published in another journal, and that you are only submitting it to this journal. Submit the manuscript to only one journal. It is not proper etiquette to submit to multiple journals at the same time. In your cover letter, briefly describe your paper and make a statement about what it will add to the journal. And then go back to your author guidelines to be certain that you have done everything that you are asked to in those guidelines. Send your submission. You may have to wait for several months. Usually 3 reviewers do peer review of your manuscript. And while you're waiting, think about starting on your next piece of writing. So now your critiques have arrived. Accepted for publication almost never occurs. It's almost unheard of. Usually it's accepted with minor revisions, which is a good thing. Even accepted with major revisions can be a good thing. So if you're asked to revise and resubmit, there's clearly interest in your manuscript. But if you happen to be rejected, it is not the end of the world. You have feedback from reviewers on which to modify your manuscript. So move quickly to revise, don't let it sit there, and find another journal that will take your article and go back through the same process of querying the editor. Make a 2-column table. Cut and paste the reviewer criticisms in the left-hand column and start working down the list to make those modifications. Cite in the right-hand column the changes that you've made and where they're located in the manuscript. Now, if there is something that you absolutely do not agree with, write the editor back when you submit your revised version and tell the editor that you didn't change X, Y, or Z, and here's the rationale. Oftentimes, editors will go along with you. If you're going to submit to another journal, do the same thing. Get feedback, use reviewer criticisms, identify another appropriate journal, and remember that there are many, many journals out there that are looking for good articles, and maybe your first choice wasn't the best fit. There are some helpful resources that I've given you. One of those is Nurse, Author, and Editor, which is a free publication. You can go online and sign up to receive it. And the focus of this journal is on tips for good writing. There's in particular a piece on writing for publication that's available on their website. Using PubMed for searches. And there's something called the Equator Network. And if you go to equatornetwork.org, It contains well-accepted, worldwide accepted guidelines on how to write systematic reviews and research reports. It actually contains checklists of what needs to be included in different types of articles. So Equator Network is a wonderful resource. Also, the American Psychological Association has a website that's focused on their style, and it gives information about how to format references in APA as well as how to do manuscripts in APA format. And then the Purdue University's online writing lab has a number of free tutorials on writing and style that could be extremely helpful. I wanted to say just a little bit about authorship criteria. The International Committee of Medical Journal Editors has uniform requirements for manuscripts that are submitted to biomedical journals. And I think almost all nursing journals subscribe to these guidelines. So I've given you the website and there's also information on ethical considerations. According to their guidelines, authorship should be based on substantial contributions to the manuscript, and they give some specific areas. Drafting the article or revising it critically for important intellectual content, and then final approval of the version that is to be published. All authors on the manuscript should meet criteria 1, 2, and 3. So just getting the funding or collecting the data or supervision of a research group, those things alone do not constitute authorship. Everyone who is listed should meet the criteria, and all of those who potentially are not listed but meet the criteria should be listed as authors. And each author should be able to take public accountability for appropriate sections of the manuscript. One more comment about authorship. No guest authors. By guest author, I mean, let's say that you know Professor X has been widely published in an area, and you ask them if you can put them on the manuscript. Unless they have contributed to the intellectual content, unless they have helped to write it or revise it critically, and unless they have reviewed the final manuscript, they do not merit authorship. So including someone who has not contributed is known as guest authorship. Ghost authors are those who put substantial effort into the content of a manuscript and revising it and helping with the development, and they're not given credit for authorship. So please be certain not to have guest or ghost authors. Salami slicing refers to primarily to research in which you have multiple publications on the same data. But the mistake that you make is repeating the same data in more than one manuscript, or slicing data so thin that there is little substance to the manuscript. So you want to be certain that you have enough meat to your manuscript, that it's publishable. You want to be certain that it does not overlap with something you have already published in terms of the data being presented. If you are publishing a second study off of a research project, that's perfectly fine, but you want to reference the prior publication. And even when you submit the manuscript, send that previously published paper to the editor so that they can see that it is not overlapping with your current submission. And then when someone has helped you with your manuscript, reviewed it critically, given you feedback, remember to give acknowledgments when they're due. Here are some references, excuse me, and resources for writing that I think will be of help to you as you begin working on your first, second, or many manuscripts that are ahead of you. And I'll be happy to take questions as soon as I get a cough drop. My colleague, Michelle Atlas, is coming to the microphone. Michelle is from Kornhauser Library at the University of Louisville, and she is the librarian for our School of Nursing. So, Michelle?
I've spoken to many of you already about some of the resources that are available to you, and many of them are specifically designed to help you in this specific area. And just want to remind you that your friendly local librarian is there to help. If you don't have a librarian, call me. Many of you have picked up this sheet. It has my contact information on the back so you can get in touch with me. And I want to make sure that you're all aware that the Kentucky Virtual Library provides you access to CINAHL, the Cumulative Index to Nursing and Allied Health Literature, the fundamental resource for information for nursing. The sheet has the website and the username and password for access to that website. Your librarian can help you with many, many aspects of publication. Locating the journal requirements, and I want to echo the importance of following the journal requirements to the letter. Many journals get an enormous number of submissions, and they feel perfectly justified in not even reviewing your manuscript if you haven't followed their directions. So do follow them. The Mumford Library, what used to be known as the University of Toledo, has created a website whose URL I do not know off the top of my head, that contains almost every biomedical journal, just a direct link to them. They've done a really nice job. Your librarian can help you make sure that you've done a thorough and proper literature search, helping you with your homework to get you started on each of these projects. Make sure that you've covered all the appropriate databases. CINAHL and PubMed are essential to any literature search in the biomedical sciences, but perhaps depending upon your topic, there are other databases that ought to be looked into, and your librarian will help you with that. Librarians also help many people with their manuscripts. It would be what's the word I want, unbiased third party to take a look at your manuscript, and give you an objective review of it, someone with no biases or anything to gain from it. Help you make sure that your references are accurate, help you with editing, and we can also help find appropriate journals for you to publish in, by checking out those impact factors for the nurses. I do have to mention that the company that puts out the impact factors, and there's only one resource that gets impact factors, and that's called the Journal Citation Reports. They kind of skip on nurses. They don't cover as many nursing journals as you would think they should. Both the American Nursing Association and the Medical Library Association have been trying to get this to change, but so far I don't think they've had a whole lot of luck. But do contact your local librarian for help in producing any research work, particularly in systematic reviews. The basis of a systematic review is the review of the literature, and your librarian can help you do that or work with you to do it. So make sure that you all pick up one of these sheets before you leave so that we can make sure that you get the best possible resources for all your research work and increase your chances of getting an article published.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And she is awesome at what she does. She's been a tremendous help to so many of our faculty and our students in the School of Nursing. Yes?
So, Paul, first of all, thank you very much for such a good presentation. I think it's
Well,
very
thank you.
informative. I think one thing that we need to know as nurses and to publish, you're absolutely right. We hold a lot of expertise, but we don't always share that expertise with others through publications. It's scary. You know, you hear research and evidence-based practice, and if you're not familiar with that, it becomes very scary to you. And I've had the fortunate pleasure to work with I think one of your previous colleagues, Dr. Dorothy Brokoff. I don't know if you know.
Yes.
So, yeah, Dorothy and I have actually published together, and Dorothy is a great resource, but and not all of us have access to universities and to professors such as yourself, but I'm curious to know if there's the opportunity for people who don't have that access to actually network and collaborate with people like yourself when they're interested in publishing and working with you collaboratively so that they can have a good publication.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
And if I'm not the right person for the topic, I could help network and find someone who might be the expert in the topic.
I think it just helps if you have someone who's done this before.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely
You're
correct.
not so scared then.
Yeah. When I think back, I'll just say the first thing that I ever wrote was a book review. The second thing was an abstract. And then the third piece was my master's thesis. So I started very small, and the more you write and get accepted for publication, the more confidence you gain.
Did I hear you say that it is permissible and perhaps a good idea to contact the editor as you're developing the idea to see if there's a fit?
Absolutely, because you don't want to spin your wheels getting it in the format of that particular journal if they are not interested in the topic.
See, I didn't realize that you could do that before you
Yes.
asked for
Oh, yes. They welcome emails, informing them about the topic, and we'll tell you straight up, yes or no. Well, thank you all very much. Enjoy being with you.